Good evening, everyone. It's another beautiful day in the Napa Valley. Thank you so much for joining us again this evening to taste a little oak-free Chardonnay tonight. And it's nice to welcome all our friends and neighbors back again. It's great to see you all. I love it when you share your video. It's fun to see everybody getting ready to have a nice glass of wine together during the sip. So thank you for joining. And as you all know, because you've joined us before, I'm Emma Swain. I'm the CEO at St. Supéry, and I'm going to do a little housekeeping down at the bottom. You can pop up participants and you can raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question of us all, or you can also start the chat on the side and type in your chats right over to the right of us. So I try to make sure I'm watching and see everybody's questions so we get answers from our guest speakers. I think I've got a little somebody needing muting there. So thank you all for coming, and we're going to kick off this evening with Matt Stornetta, our Director of Vineyard Operations, who is out at the Dollarhide Ranch, atop Parcel 24, or in the middle of Parcel 24. Wow, that is just a fantastic day. It is so pretty. I wish we were all out there with you. I know it was over 80 degrees out there yesterday. So because of the low bandwidth there, I'll just have Michael Scholz, our VP of Viticulture and Winemaking, give us a little tour of what we're all looking at.
Hey, this is a great shot of the Dollarhide Ranch. Quite fantastic. Matt is standing on Parcel 24, or kind of in the middle of it a little bit, or almost. Parcel 24 is a pretty spectacular Cabernet parcel. In fact, right behind Matt is a very steep hillside terrace, which is, you know, reminiscent of those old world sort of steep terrace blocks. And as you see Matt pan around onto the top of the hill, you'll see some of those terraces come into view, perhaps.
Yep.
Yep. Keep panning through there, Matt. Yep. Excellent. And so it goes way up beyond those tree lines and what have you. You pan all the way around, you see that's a good shot right there that illustrates all those terraces that roll all the way up that hill. Really a pretty cool Cabernet site, fairly unique, and one that works very well for us, which we're fortunate, and with those nice mature Cabernet vines. But as we pan back towards the lake, we'll be looking at northeast across the lake. And that's our big lake. You know, on the Dollarhide Ranch, we have 7 lakes. We are really fortunate to have those. Those water sources are incredible resource for us. Now, water is important for anyone, anytime, of course. But when it comes to agriculture, it goes without saying, water is sort of a bit of a lifeblood. It's incredibly important. This is our big lake, and the big lake is fed from natural rainfall, so all the runoff from the hills and such that we have there. But it's pretty cool. We are looking sort of a northeasterly direction. As you look across that big lake there,
why did you mute us?
There's a green field on the other side, and that green field is where this Chardonnay was produced. And so the oak-free Chardonnay that I hope you have was produced on that site. And I say was because those vines are no longer there. We're actually drinking the last Chardonnay from that parcel, and it always did produce terrific Chardonnay, really terrific stuff. And 2018 is no exception, quite remarkable. But as we farm a ranch and we get to know it better and better, you start to understand the soils and you recognise what the potential could be. And the soils in that location really lend themselves to producing some great Cabernet Sauvignon in the future. So the Chardonnay had been in there a long time, and
the sun was on. I'm not sure what the heck he did. So
it just makes sense for us to move that on now at this point. So we're moving towards Cabernet, and what that means is, since that vineyard was originally planted, which is over 30 years ago, we've learned a lot more about viticulture and winemaking in general in the wine world, and so we'll apply some of that knowledge and that research and what we know of this ranch to that new development. And so that could include lots of aspects, but one we can mention maybe is changing the road direction from what was there to what is optimal for wine quality. And so we'll do that, and we'll put it into a road direction that optimizes sunlight onto the fruit in the morning. So what I mean by that is The fruit will get the morning sunlight to the exposed bunches, which is the cooler summer sunlight. And that will help enhance color development, phenolic structure, tannin development, and tannin ripeness. And equally, as the sun passes overhead from those vines in the future, the warm afternoon sun will hit the other side of the vine, which will keep maintain its full leaf canopy and keep that fruit shaded, so it doesn't get that extreme heat for as often. And we know from work that we've done that will enhance Cabernet Sauvignon quality. And from the soils we have there, it just lends itself to being a great Cabernet site. So that's what we have happening there on that side in this situation.
Well, it is just gorgeous, Michael. What a beautiful day at the ranch. Thank you, Matt, for giving us these beautiful views and taking such good care of the vineyard to make these great wines. It's quite a lovely day. So let's jump over to Brooke, who's one of our winemakers, Brooke Shank at the winery. And Brooke, why don't you tell us a little bit about how this wine's made?
Sure, absolutely. So the Chardonnay grapes, they're hand-picked at night when the temperatures are quite cool. The grapes come into the winery early in the morning, and then we press off to tank. We'll let the juice settle at a really cold temperature. And then a few days later, we'll actually rack the clear juice off of the pulp of nectarine, apricot, peach, maybe apple can be in there. And we're trying to showcase those flavors. So we use the stainless steel to enhance the purity of the fruit. And that'll also retain the acidity and the brightness of it as well. So it's kind of a different spin on Chardonnay. And what we'll do is once the fermentation is complete, we'll keep the wine on its yeast lees, and we'll stir that lees up once a week. It's called sur-lie maturation, like on its lees, and stirring it once a week will kind of increase the mouthfeel on the wine and make it a little more rich in the palate and maybe give you a little more width as you're tasting the wine. Also, we'll peel off a little bit of wine into a different stainless steel tank. A small amount of this blend we'll put through malolactic fermentation, which is a secondary fermentation that kind of drops out and softens the acidity and also creates a little bit of creaminess on it. So that gives us a component that allows us to layer the blend a little bit and make it a little more complex. So that's how we make this glass of wine here. One of my favorite wines, and you know, it's been nice, really nice weather in Napa Valley in the last couple days. We've had 80-degree weather, and I really enjoy sitting out on the deck and enjoy being by my pool and just drinking a glass of this wine. It's great with food. It's also just nice to have on a Saturday afternoon as well. So I'm stocking up on it because it's the last of it.
Well, sorry, Brooke, maybe we'll buy another vineyard one day that has some Chardonnay on it.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we are down to the last of it, but it is quite delicious. And I love the texture that you get on this wine from that sur-lie aging. We talked about that with the Dollarhide Sauvignon Blanc and with the Vertu, and how nice that feel is. We got a couple of questions. People are, how big are the stainless steel tanks, barrel size or large tanks?
So we have three different Chardonnay blocks, or we had, I guess, in that parcel that you see out there at Dollarhide, we had three different Chardonnay blocks. And when we bring it into the cellar, we actually keep those three blocks separate. So depending on the amount of fruit is what tank it's going to go into. So we have various size of tanks in the cellar, and we use what tank is going to fit that block.
Okay. And the next question was, why waiting a week between the stirrings of the leaves?
That's a good question, Michael. do you have an answer to that?
Yeah. Listen, it's just we recognise that stirring is positive. You can't stir all day and all night and all the time. So we stir frequently. Weekly is quite regular. It's quite a lot of stirring actually. And you can do less, you can do more, depending on how much of that creamy textural feel you want to achieve. We've realized that for this wine, that weekly interval works exceptionally well to achieve that textural feel, that creaminess within the wine, enhancing the complexity within the wine a little bit. Yeah, good
And
question.
you do that for about 4 months, is that correct?
Yes, we do.
All right, that was another question, so I thought we'd ask. Excellent. Well, thanks for that update, Brooke and Michael. Let's jump to Asael, who's in the lab. Last week, Asael talked a little bit about what we do in the vineyard as far as analysis as the wines are coming in and the winemaking process. And let's talk a little bit more about once the grapes are in the cellar.
Well, of course, as you mentioned last week, we talked about grape maturity. So we talked about some of the parameters we use here at the winery in order to track this evolution through time. We mentioned that one of the main analyses we do is the sugar content. So basically in the vineyard, we'll go from 0 and then we'll be going up. So it's an increment, if you see it as a curve. Once the fruit comes to the winery, we'll start fermenting on this process that Brooke already mentioned. So you will see a decrement. So we'll do the opposite fashion. We do this tracking and we measure the consumption of the sugar that you can see in this curve here for our 2018 Chardonnay. The pink line shows the decrement, the decreasing of the sugar as it ferments. And then the blue one in the bottom shows the temperature. So we like to keep a cool fermentation happening around 58 Fahrenheit, 15 Celsius. And as you can see, we start at around 24 breaks, which is the sugar unit for total soluble solids, up to 0 at the end of the curve after 2.5, 3 weeks. After that, we'll use another technique. Right now, we use the DMA that I showed you guys the other time. This one here. This one gives us a rough estimation of the sugar content, actually quite accurate for a higher range. When it goes to 0 breaks with this machine, we will go to enzymatic analysis and spectrophotometric analysis. So we can actually give the green light to a ferment to a tank that is already finished, that is already dried under 1 gram per liter of sugar. So fermentation is probably my favorite step in winemaking, because this is where all this magic happens. So the yeast will feed out of the sugar, alcohol will be produced, CO2 will be produced as well, heat will be released. So since it's an exothermic process, we have our tanks with a jacket, with a cooling system that allows us to control this temperature. So we don't want to have spikes in the temperature. We don't want to have a lot of heat. So we want to keep it around 15 Celsius, 58 Fahrenheit. So we want to keep all the aromas of the fruit. We want to showcase the Chardonnay. And it's very interesting because you have so many aromas happening. Like, who would have thought that from grapes you have this really big palette of aromas. You have guava, you have quince, as you mentioned earlier, even banana you will smell sometimes in the cellar, which it changes, every day changes. So at the end of the fermentation, you will have just the expression of the fruit and the secondary aromas that happen through fermentation. Even some toasted bread might show during fermentation. So it's pretty interesting, and we do different kind of analysis in the lab, but we just use them as a tool to guide us through the winemaking. At the end of the day, the palate is what guides us the most. So it's pretty cool.
That's interesting. I think also, you mentioned a couple of really interesting things. One, the aromas that you get during fermentation sometimes are quite different than what you get in the finished wine. Like, as I mentioned to you, it makes me happy in the middle of Sauvignon Blanc harvest when I walk through the cellar and I get that big banana aroma. I'm thinking, oh yeah, all the Sauvignon Blanc's fermenting, and that's unique. But also, this wine has just this fullness on the palate from that surly aging and richness. But it almost feels sweet, but it is fermented completely dry as you're checking all the way along to make sure that there is no residual sugar. So I think that's always an interesting perception that we have in wine tasting. When a wine is richer from a warmer climate, you sometimes get that perception of sweetness, but in fact, there's no sugar there. So it's pretty cool. Very good. So Michael, do you want to add anything else about the wine and your thoughts about this oak-free Chardonnay?
Sure. You know, I guess majority of California Chardonnays are barrel aged and barrel fermented, and so this is a bit of a departure from that style. As we've talked about in previous weeks, you know, I grew up in Australia. I grew up in a sort of a fairly, well, very renowned area called the Barossa Valley wine district, and around where I lived, there was a number of other valleys within, you know, an hour's drive, and other wine districts. And there was a movement towards Chardonnay being fermented in stainless steel and eliminating the oak. So you sort of undress the wine and show just what that varietal can do as its fruit on its own and its own expression, and makes a wine that's a little more crisp and holds its acid just a little better. And so I was exposed to those styles, and I've enjoyed those styles then, and I guess we've led to doing it here at St. Supéry and the Napa Valley, of course, with this wine. And we do it for those same reasons, that you've undressed the Chardonnay, you've taken the oak out of it, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a style differentiation. You've taken the oak out of it, and then allowed the fruit to shine. Well, with that, we try to incorporate a little complexity with the Surly maturation that Brooke was talking about, and a tiny little bit of male active fermentation. We don't do a lot because that softens acids. And we want to actually maintain a crisp acidity in this wine. So we've done that, and that has allowed us to express this wine, build volume with a Surly maturation, what have you, but maintain the vibrant, fresh fruit aromatics and flavors that Chardonnay really is. And we're fortunate we have a great vineyard and we grow some really nice Chardonnay and what have you. But you know, it shows really bright, fresh fruit. It's those typical sort of rich, sort of tropical sort of aromas, and that got that apricot stone fruit quality. I think this wine might have a hint of that kiwi, or even maybe a thread of lime there as well. Really kind of nice. Flavor-wise, follows through from the aromatics as most wines do, and I think we see some nice ripe nectarine. I like this, that sort of mandarin orange sort of appeal that's on the palate, and maybe the finish that has that sort of that lemon essence or lemon zest sort of finish, which gives that zippy sort of crispness to the completion of the wine, which is really cool. It's a really fun wine, and I think that brightness and that freshness sort of lends itself to some very interesting food pairings, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and speaking of food pairings, I really do think that all of the wines you and the team make at St. Supéry have just great, bright, fresh acidity. And part of that is knowing the vineyard so well as an estate winery, and the altitude and climate that we have at Dollarhide. But part of it is also a style factor. And I love that freshness with pairing our wines with food kind of across the board. And so let's jump to Chef Tod in the kitchen, because I know everyone's dying to see what he's cooking for dinner tonight, and hopefully you are too. But Tod, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on pairing the Chardonnay with food and some of your favorite things.
Well, as you mentioned, our wines, quite often because of the freshness and the acidity on the finish, it makes them incredibly food friendly. So much easier for me to pair up with. You can do richer or creamier type of dishes or food because it still has the acid to kind of cleanse your palate and refresh everything, so that the next bite tastes great and the next sip tastes great as well. So a lot of times what I'm doing is I'm looking at the body of the wine and really trying to pair up the body of the dish to be the same, so I can get fairly close to that same kind of mouthfeel, if you will. This wine with all that forward fruit, but yet that really bright acid on the finish, is a really fun one to work with, and I enjoy it a lot.
Thank you. And so what, I think it was leek and potato soup this week, one of my personal favorites.
Leek and potato soup. So springtime, and around our estate here, I'm fortunate to have a beautiful garden. So that's one of my first inspirations that I look to. I'm also happy to pair up with some beautiful sustainable seafood with our white wines because they are so crisp. But I'm going to go through the garden and take a look for some things. And in this case, I found some beautiful spring leeks, which I combined and turned into almost like a classic leek and potato soup.
Oh, delicious, delicious. I have found that potatoes really do add like a nice textural flavor combination with the Chardonnay. It's not just the flavor component, but that texture with the creamy potato is really nice complement to the wine.
In this case, I'm using some Yukon Gold potatoes. The Yukon Golds I enjoy because not only the color, but they have a nice sweetness to them, but they can also puree really nicely. Just to give you a little glimpse here of what I put together earlier. By running out to the garden earlier, I picked up some of our beautiful spring leeks. Here's some of the Yukon Gold potatoes. I just peel them down. I have a nice stock. You can use vegetable stock or chicken stock. It adds a little more mouthfeel to it. I've got some garnishes that can go with it, but essentially what it is all the leek part, the white and the light green, cooked down very, very softly. There's some butter in there to develop some of that nice sweet savoriness to it. And then you add the potatoes and then your stock, and you just simmer it very gently until the potatoes basically are ready to puree and mush. And from there, you can just simply put it into a blender, finish it with some cream, adjust it to your taste for seasoning, for salt, and a little bit of pepper. In this case, what I also did was I took some of the leeks that I pre-cooked off as part of the puree in there and used that as a garnish. And so I have these beautiful leeks that are softly cooked, just the white and the light green part. The top darker green is a little too fibrous to use, so I won't use that. One element that I added to this recipe that's included with today's session basically has this recipe for the addition of a garnish of some Granny Smith apples. So I love that combination, the flavor combination of apples with the leeks, the savory and sweet. I think it goes really well together.
Oh, beautiful.
And so I'll garnish with some of those, not only for crunch and texture, but also that little pop of sweet. It does have that fruit forward characteristic in the wine. So I think the apple stands up really nicely with it. And then kind of an expression of what's going on in our terroir and our seasonality right now. Some of the herbs goes fantastic with Chardonnay. It's always a great pairing. They're really good friends. They hang out together quite a bit. So some tarragon leaves. Here's some chives and some chive blossoms that are coming out. Our garden's starting to really take off. Our flower beds looking really beautiful. So just kind of an expression in the terroir, what's happening around our property here on the estate.
Oh, beautiful.
This is a great way to kind of garnish, add a little crunch and texture. You also have the aromatics when you smell everything in there. From a sip of the wine to a spoonful of that soup and then back again to the wine, it should be really harmonious.
Oh, that is just gorgeous. How pretty. Just amazing. Really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
It looks a lot prettier than my potato soup.
There's a lot of different versions of it, that's for sure. Yes,
I got to keep working on mine. But, you know, I did have a question for you. You mentioned that you don't use the tops of the leeks when doing the sauteing. Do you use those in your broth or any other use, or just composting those?
I have. We are, you know, being Napa Green, we do quite a bit of our own composting so that it turns back into our own compost for our gardens and for the vineyards. But those I have used in the past for some of our darker stocks or broths and things like that. So if something's going to be browned off, like maybe a brown meat stock, then I can definitely use some of those green tops of the leeks themselves. But otherwise, I'm looking for the beautiful sweet part of the light greens to the white right in through here. They are kind of a dirty vegetable. They grow up through the soil, and so there's a lot of dirt and soil that gets trapped inside. So you definitely have to soak them really well and let them kind of rinse out so all the sand and grit falls to the bottom.
Yeah, that's always a little bit of a task, but kind of fun because you know it came from the earth, not from a styrofoam pack.
Exactly.
Exactly. So we also have some other fantastic food and wine pairing experts with us tonight. One, Bruce Sturgeon is coming to us from Blue Acre Seafood in Seattle, Washington. Bruce has a long history of food and wine pairing in Seattle and with sustainable seafood. So we're super excited, and with St. Supéry Wines, super excited to have you join us and talk about what you're pairing tonight, Bruce.
Absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to have long history with St. Supéry, over 28 years of buying their and selling their wines. And one thing I look for when I writing a wine list for a restaurant is the wines that I put on there got to match well with the food. And the unoaked Chardonnay, since I've been at Blue Acre for the last 10 years, has been one of our staples on our list. It's because it's such a great food wine, being unoaked, having that richness in the mid palate and that crisp finish goes great with so many of our dishes on our menu. And also it possesses a great value, which is another aspect they look for in restaurants, so that the wines on the list are approachable and pair well with the menu, as well as at a price point that people can hopefully have more than one bottle. So tonight, one thing that we do so well is Alaskan king crab. This is Alaskan red king crab from the Bering Sea. We get it out of Dutch Harbor. We work with a crab broker that picks out the best of the best. It's completely unadulterated until we get it. It does come in frozen, and we don't do anything to it until it's ordered, and we just put it out and steam it up and serve it. So that's what we're going to have tonight with a little drawn butter. Got some sugar snap peas with little toasted almond and fresh lemon. It's going to be a beautiful dinner with this wine. It matches so well. The crab's got a certain amount of richness to it, and with the drawn butter, the finishes so crisp that it's kind of like Todd said, it kind of cleanses the palate, but it's got enough body and richness to stand up to the crab. So it's a perfect match, and we like it with a lot of other dishes on our menu. Fresh halibut. We do petroli sole with just a brown butter lemon caper sauce. It's awesome. This time of year we're doing swordfish Oscar with Dungeness crab and fresh asparagus and hollandaise. So it just pairs so well with so many of our dishes. So it's a lot of my servers, it's like our go-to Chardonnay when people are trying to find a pairing that's going to go well with their dinners.
Oh, well, that's great. Thank you for that. But you also said something that, is near and dear to our heart at St. Supéry. We just kicked off the Great Sustainable Seafood Tour, and our next round of virtual tastings are going to be really focused on sustainable seafood. And your restaurant is 100% sustainable seafood.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've the owner and executive chef Kevin Davis. He's always big proponent of that. It's it's a little bit more expensive way to purchase seafood, because when you buy foreign caught seafood, there's no rules or regulations actually, not only where it came from, what species it is. So with buy U.S. certified seafood, we know where it came from, the GPS coordinates and the captain's middle name that caught the fish. So it's really important to us to walk that talk, and we know we're getting the best quality. And as long as our philosophy has always been is like, buy the best, don't screw it up, everybody's going to be happy. So
absolutely,
it's worked for us for 10 years. So it's worked Kevin his entire life. He's been doing this for 30 years. So
well, it's really important to know where it comes from. All of our food, not just our seafood, but all of our food, to know where it comes from.
The picture is to do it right and not support the ones that people don't buy bad products and they'll quit selling. As long as you keep, as long as you buy the good stuff and support the suppliers that do it right, they'll stay in business, and the ones that don't do it right, they'll go out of business. So the public got a lot of control over that, as long as they're aware.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, Bruce. And we also have with us Carrie Schmidt, who's the general manager at Edgewood in Lake Tahoe. And Carrie's a big food and wine fan. So Carrie, tell us what you've been pairing the oak-free Chardonnay with.
Thank you, Emma. Along with Bruce's philosophy on sustainable seafood, we at Edgewood also make a commitment to source all of our ingredients at the best quality as local as possible. And we also follow through the Monterey Bay Seafood Watch program to look and see what would be our best options. So we choose to showcase our halibuts. Our grilled halibut is served with our Yukon Gold potatoes, along with a romesco and a frisee with little pickled shallots.
Wow.
Thank you. We feel that this is, you know, with the acidity of the wine, the complexity of the halibut, along with the Yukon Gold and the starch, like you were mentioning, just the textures and such. This is just a match made in heaven. It's just a marriage that's beyond beautiful. But like Brooke said, it's also a fantastic wine to enjoy outside on the patio at our restaurant.
That's excellent. Well, that does look delicious. We're definitely looking forward to you and Bruce's restaurants reopening and being able to come in and enjoy them, as you're not doing takeout at this time, but we're sure that we'll be back to see you soon. And you mentioned the Monterey Bay Seafood Watch, and that's just a tremendous resource for sustainable seafood. And they will be our guest on April 30th. So be sure to tune back in, and we'll learn a little bit more about sustainable seafood then. Carrie, do you have any other regions or Chardonnay characteristics that you like to look for around the world? We tend to, Michael talked a little bit about the Barossa Valley. How about you in Chardonnay?
So one of my dear to heart passions that I do when curating a wine menu is to present something that would be unique and open people's minds. I tend to drink a lot of oak Chardonnays from the Chablis region and such, a little white Burgundy. So it's definitely been a challenge to find a Chardonnay, in my personal opinion, to enjoy, because I like to pair my wines with food. And so when this came into our portfolio and we tasted, it was an immediate absolute. It's such a fun, versatile wine. It can be paired with so many things. So we've enjoyed having this on our menu.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having it. And we really look forward to seeing you again soon. And we also have coming all the way from Texas, from Cafe Blue, Jason Lantrop Troop, who is the managing partner there. And you've also got a major seafood focus as well, and pouring the oak-free Chardonnay. We should have saved you all up for Sustainable Seafood Week. So tell us what your philosophy is, Jason, with this wine.
This wine's very new to us. We just discovered it recently and weren't really looking to add another California Chardonnay. We already had a couple that we were pouring by the glass that both did really well. And we found it, we tasted it, and again, we weren't really looking for it, but it found us, and really our whole group that tasted it just really fell in love with it and decided that we really didn't have any choice but to put it on our wine list. So it's been very well received in the short time that we've had it, and it's as has been touched on, it's very versatile, and it pairs with a lot of different things on our menu in some fun different ways.
Oh, well, thank you for that. So tell us, you're open for takeout right now. So tell us some of the dishes that are available for takeout that we could enjoy this wine with.
Well, as far as things, obviously being an oyster bar, that's a big part of what we do. And we've had to make the oysters unavailable because they don't really lend themselves to takeout. So we really kind of focused on the fish and shrimp. On the fish side, we have really great, a couple great sea bass dishes. The kick-ass sea bass, which is kind of an Asian take on it. It's poached in a sesame teriyaki sauce. We also do just a really nice, simply grilled sea bass that really lets the fish shine through. And my personal favorite there is to do it Oscar style. So you've got that nice grilled sea bass and the rich flavor from the fish, complemented with scratch béarnaise and the jumbo on crab meat, and the Saint Supéry oak-free Chardonnay. Really, the crispness of it really kind of cuts through the rich fish and the rich Bernays and really complements it really nicely.
Oh, that just sounds delicious. You've made us really, really hungry. So one of the favorite questions we've been asking the last few weeks has been, what is your go-to in the pantry right now that you could whip up to go with this Chardonnay? Because I think a lot of us are looking at cupboards that are getting a little low and gauging that next grocery store run while we're in the sip.
Well, so, I had a little inspiration earlier today. My son, who's 7, is in first grade, is at home with us. Today for lunch, I asked him what he wanted for lunch, and he said, well, just surprise me. So, I went to the kitchen and did some scrounging, and what I came up with was mac and cheese tacos. Being here in Austin, we'll put anything on a flour tortilla and call it a taco. So we did mac and cheese tacos for lunch. And as we were talking about food pairings, it kind of occurred to me that those mac and cheese tacos would actually be a pretty killer pairing with this wine. So.
Oh, I think my nephew would really love that. And I think my sister-in-law and brother would like to sip on the wine while he's having a taco, having been home educators for a while here as well. We're seeing a lot of parents appreciating all that our teachers do for us every day now that the kids are home. So that's Absolutely. A great tip. And Bruce, what are you finding when you scrounge around in the pantry?
Well, one thing we've been really successful with that goes well with this wine is, we'll take whatever vegetables we have left over, chop it up, saute with a little butter, add regular rice, wild rice, or we just stock up on like pasta pilaf, and then throw that in there and just let it all cook together. And whatever protein, if we have some chicken, that works out really well, makes a really nice meal and uses up all the leftovers. Or we can it's stocked up on tortillas, so we can make some nice fresh vegetable chicken tacos with fresh vegetables and a little slaw to go with it. So that's been really a lot of fun to see how creative we can be. And last night I just took all the vegetables we had and chopped it up and threw it in salad. So I made like a vegetable medley salad.
Oh, delicious.
So, yeah.
Lots of good suggestions there. Carrie, what about you? What are you finding in the pantry, the fridge to whip up at the end of the food cycle?
I'm with Bruce on that food cycle in Tahoe. Anything that we can put in our pantry, quote unquote, it goes further than what's in our refrigerator. So any type of vegetable, and I found some cauliflower and I roasted a little bit of cauliflower and put it into a cauliflower salad, a little bit of onion, some chives and such. But we had 54 degrees today, so I enjoyed a little bit of sun and got out and had a glass of wine today. So it was lovely.
That's a great day. That's a very nice day. I on the vegetable front the other day, I made a cilantro soup, which I think would be fantastic with this wine. It was on the Supéry blog, and I made a few modifications because I didn't have everything, but it was delicious. So, Chef Todd, what are you pulling out of the pantry this week?
Well, those all sound like great ideas. I'm assuming that if I'm thinking about my house, we may be out of vegetables or getting low on some of those. Maybe we've already had some chicken, or possibly we've already had some seafood for the week. So I'm always going to default down to the cheese drawer. And as far as cheese goes, I'm happy to, especially with this Chardonnay, the Chardonnay in general, to go to like a brie cheese or camembert or something like that. That's a fresher type of a lighter cheese, cow's milk cheese, I think would be great. Whether you have some dried fruit, maybe some dried apricots, put some toasted almonds on there. And I think that would be a pretty fun way to kind of raid the pantry, if you will.
I think somebody I said that they made a honey baked brie earlier. So you are along the same lines there with the chat group. That sounds pretty delicious. I do tend to find in my house there's always cheese and there's always broth. I'm always making broth. So I do find that you know, you can put all those random extra things into broth and you suddenly have soup. So that tends to be my go-to in the pantry. That all sounds really delicious. And Todd, do you want to talk a little bit about what's coming up with the Great Sustainable Seafood Tour and what we have to look forward to starting April 30th?
Coming up, our next tastings after next week, but we're going to begin a series of sustainable seafood virtual wine tastings that you can join us with, please. We are going to be featuring our Great Sustainable Seafood Tour and contest that's going on. So each week we'll be focusing on one of our wines, a particular recipe that I have developed to go and pair with those wines, and especially being sourced from sustainable sources, whether it's a wild-caught product or a good example of aquaculture or a farm product that the Monterey Bay Seafood Watch approves of. And that's the only way that I will source my seafood here. Kind of really pairs up well with our commitment here that we have as far as sustainability for the land and for the way that we make our wines. So it's natural for me in the kitchen to want to do the same thing. And so we're going to feature assorted chefs and guests from industry that feature sustainable seafood and are on the same page with us. So it should be really fun.
It'll be really fun, and also the purveyors you're having come will be great. I was very happy to read in The Guardian last week that not only do we have within our power to sustain our oceans as they are today, but within the next 50 years, if we follow sustainable sourcing with seafood, we have the power to restore them to their former glory. So that's a really exciting goal for all of us to think that in our lifetimes that can happen. It's pretty cool. And I think you've got a lot of great guest speakers coming, so that'll be fun. And Bruce, there was a question on the chat line. Do you follow the Monterey Bay seafood guidelines? And I believe
absolutely. Yeah, we actually put the little guides in the check presenters, so the people can see what they should be eating and not eating. They can take it with them if they want. Yeah, Monterey Bay's aquarium has been a great partner over the last 10 years of helping us design our menu around their recommendations.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you very much. And next week, we're going to be tasting 2 of our single vineyard Dollarhide Cabernet Sauvignons. Our Dollarhide single vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon that is available around the country. So do check our finder on the website. You can put in your zip code, Dollarhide Cabernet Sauvignon, and it will show you who's purchased it near you in the last 60 days. And also our Dollarhide Elevation 2014 that recently shipped to our club members. So that one's only available from the winery. So we wanted to make sure there was something for everyone to be able to taste around the country. If you don't have that in your cellar or ordered it from the winery, both of those delicious Cabernets will be fun to try. And if you have more than one of you in the house, maybe you try both, or pull out your Corvin and try them both. So that you can have a little taste of them next to each other. So we look forward to doing that next week. And between now and then, please be safe, be well, and take care of yourselves. And cheers. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks for coming.